All right, here we go. Quadrilaterals. What's special about quadrilaterals? So we could say anything special? What are the sum of the interior angles? All right, that's 360 degrees. What's the sum of the exterior angles? Anything else? All right, it's four-sided. How many diagonals does it have? 2 diagonals. Yep, all the sides are straight lines. But other than that, nothing. Nothing special about a quadrilateral. This is the general shape. This is just if you went bam, 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 like that. There's nothing special going on there. When we start getting into different shapes like a parallelogram, and I'll label that A, B, C, and D, what do you know? What about AB and DC? They're equal, so they're congruent. So I could say AB is congruent to DC. Any other shapes that are or sides that are congruent? AD and BC. So AD is congruent to BC. Make sure you have the segment sides on there. Parallel. What sides are parallel? Opposite sides are parallel. So AB is parallel to DC. So also, side AB is parallel to side DC. And the same thing here. I'll just put 2 marks there to show that those 2 sides are parallel. So I could say that AD is parallel to BC. What else do we know? What do you know about angles? Do you know anything about angle A? Opposite angles are congruent. Angle A is congruent to which angle? Angle C. And angle B is congruent to which angle? Angle D. So opposite angles are congruent. So we know stuff about the sides. We know stuff about the angles. What about the diagonals? And if we drew those in, I'm going to draw those in black. And I don't have a straight edge, so I'm just going to do the best that I can. What's this point? Midpoints. So diagonals have the same midpoint. So they bisect each other. So this side right here, actually, if that's 1, 1, I have to put 2 here and 2 here. Because if all of them had 1 mark, what does that mean? They're all congruent, but in parallelograms, they're not all congruent to each other. So I made a boo-boo there. But we fixed it. Good to go. Now, this diagonal is cut in half. This diagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a crazy picture, isn't it? With a lot of different things. But we want to have that picture. Good? Now, the nice thing about a parallelogram, when you start talking about a parallelogram, and then you have a rectangle, and then you have the rhombus, and then you have the square, which is what we're going to talk about today, just these. Everything that the parallelogram has, the rectangle, the rhombus, and the square has. So these three shapes have the same characteristics as a... I'm just going to draw the parallelogram because I'm getting kind of lazy in my old age. And it's a very, very bad one. But do you guys get the idea? Yep. I'm going to squeeze that out a little bit so I have a little bit more room to work. So for rectangles, what we want to do is we want to highlight what's different. Because we know that that side's congruent to that side's congruent to that side. This angle is congruent to this angle, that angle is congruent to that angle. That side is parallel to that side is parallel to that side. That's all we get because it's a parallelogram. But what do we know about rectangles? What about their angles? They're all 90 degrees. So any adjacent pair of sides are perpendicular. Which means that the slopes, if you multiply them together, what do you get? If you multiply perpendicular slopes, what do you get? Well, you get an opposite, but it's a certain number. -1. Or they're opposite reciprocals. So if one of the slopes was 2/3, what's the other slope? Not -2/3, -3/2. Because you have to take the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3/2, and then you just, since that's positive, that's negative. Now, one last thing when it comes to diagonals. And I'll throw those diagonals in here. And this is not true for parallelograms, but it's true for rectangles. Diagonals are congruent. So we still have a midpoint that cuts them in half. It just so happens that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These four segments are all the same. So if that's a 10, what's the length of this one? If this one's 10, this one is 10, and this one is 10, and this one is 10. All right, so that's good to go for those first two, correct? All right.